'Twas a time before Christmas, this time of the year, when many a Magic player gave out a big cheer.
The One Ring is gone!
They yelled out with glee.
Finally, Smeagol is free!
But there was much more to come, unbeknownst to none. Santa had delivered more freedom than just one.
Splinter Twin? Looting?
Yelled little Timmy.
Green Suns and Opal?
Replied his brother Jimmy. So many toys to give the kids fun. Who cares that their average age was over 31?
Hello, everybody, and Merry Christmas. This is Battle Chads, and I'm here. I'm Josh, and I'm here with my co-host Luis. Luis,
Ho,
hello.
ho, ho!
How are you doing, Luis?
I'm not too bad. I'm doing just fine.
So how are you? This podcast we're going to be talking mainly about modern, and there's been a massive change in the modern format. It's like a completely different game almost in terms of the format itself. It's really exciting, Luis.
It's incredibly exciting. I'm back at it, playing with one of my favorite cards ever, Faithless Looting. A lot of amazing things to come with these unbans. Everyone and their mother is playing Splinter Twin, trying to make it work in some way or another. You know, the meme's finally dead about unbanned Splinter Twin, and people couldn't be happier.
I'm really happy with this unbanning because people are genuinely engaged in the format. I mean, I think the first league was like over 100, like nearly 135 O's, for example. And I imagine how many people were actually playing leagues back in that time. It's absolutely incredible. It's very combo focused, which you would expect from the bans. Would you agree with that, Luis?
I think so. I mean, if you look at it, three of the cards that were unbanned were absolutely very combo focused or something unfair focused style. Green Suns is maybe the technical least. It's used in Legacy. I think it's used more in a fair-ish way, but it can combo you out. We're yet to see a lot of elves coming out with Craterhoof Behemoth or something like that, but it's just a matter of time, I think.
It does seem that Green Suns has been, apart from like Titan, it does seem to be like the more fair. Like the thing with Opal, I think has got probably the sketchiest unban in the fact that it can enable some really broken, fast, aggressive stuff, and also a real combo enabler with like Through the Breach combo with grinding station, etc. Like that deck's in overdrive. But yeah, before we go into any particulars of the deck, we'll explain the pod what we're going to do today. So we've picked 12 decks for Christmas to talk about. These are in no particular order of power because the modern meta is not solved. It just isn't solved right now. I can't pick a particularly best deck right now. There's no Boros Energy of the format. There's no clear winner at the moment. Like there's so much brewing happening, but we've got 12 really cool decks. We're not going to put them up and have a visual aid because this is going to be mainly a listening pod, but we are going to provide example deck lists in the show notes of the 12 decks we picked. So, Luis, how we're going to do this is we're going to go, we'll pick the deck, or we'll name the deck in no particular order. We're going to talk about what it does, the strengths of that deck, and the weaknesses of that deck, and hopefully what that'll do constructively to the listener is have an informed decision of, oh, shall I try this deck? Oh, this deck sounds really interesting. Will it go well in the meta that I expect to go into locally or
Absolutely.
whatever?
Yeah, and a very important thing is don't focus too much on the actual list per se, not for this one at least. The Modern is moving really quickly, changing a lot. There's a lot of things being tested out. No one quite knows what's the best or how a deck is best constructed. If you look at Splinter Twin, it's being played in about 372 million different shells. Yeah. So trying to give you this is the deck you should be playing straight off the bat is not the best way we can present this to you. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely some things that are do's and don'ts, but we want to focus more on the cards or the archetype that you should be probably focusing on to have a little more fun, a little more pizzazz, and a better chance of winning something coming up, any sort of tournament, whether it's online or in paper.
This right now is a brewer's paradise. Shout out to Teasdale MTG, who's been brewing with Modern. He's a pro player and he's out brewing with Modern, so it's great to see it. It's really been warming my cockles, actually. Getting into a format that I particularly love. And it's a real brewer's paradise right now. I know Spike's having a great time at the
Oh,
moment.
he's
I know
loving it.
Twitter's up in arms about what's good, what's bad, like, but there's no negative about it. Like, it seems to be like a real positive B&R, and people are really, really enjoying it.
Exactly. It's very much brought on the festive cheer. Very little crying going on, which I'm happy to see. I want everyone to just be enjoying themselves. Have fun with the new cards. We'll have enough time for crying in the new year, so don't worry. This is the time to enjoy.
New year, new me, new deck.
Yeah.
So, should we talk about the first deck we picked?
Absolutely.
Which is Froculus. So it's using the Frog package and the Aberrant Oculus deck with Unearth, etc. So it's the point of the deck is to try and cheat out Aberrant Oculus using Unearth, but it does have that late game strategy of you can cast it by filling your graveyard. It has enablers such as Thought Scour in some of the blue-black lists, which is, target player puts the top 2 cards of the library into the graveyard and then draw a card to really turbo out an Oculus or even a Murktide. Some of them are playing Murktide Regent.
It's our pet deck. It's what we love. It's our, Josh and I have been on this for ages. We know Oculus quite well. This obviously hasn't changed terribly much since the new unbanning. It's quite a similar shell to what it was before, since before the banning of the One Ring and all that. So maybe you're not super excited to see it just yet because it's like, oh, I've seen this deck before. However, there are some new fun toys, new fun things. Yeah. You've been able to put some cards that you really couldn't before because they just couldn't keep up with the format and what it was doing, which is really nice to see. In this version of the deck now, you have a little bit more. Some people are playing Tamiyo, for example, which allows you to have that grindier kind of set, which before was just outdone by the One Ring, but now you can play it, which is really nice. Some people are playing it in Grixis as well, instead of just blue-black. This is it's a tempo frog deck, but instead it has the red to use Faithless Looting to be able to put the Oculus in the bin. A few more things that you can do. It's just a little more fun. And you get to have some fun pieces against the graveyard, the artifact decks. Hercule's Recall, not a common card in the sideboards back in the day, but now you have it. You get to send all the artifacts that people are flinging on turn 1-2 back to their hand, and it feels really good.
Or if you are splashing the red for the Grixis shell, you can just cast Meltdowns to destroy those artifacts. So yeah, the strength of this deck particularly is if you know what you're attacking in the meta, you can build your deck specifically for that, and it has a really strong proactive plan in a probably the most powerful tempo shell because of things like threats like Frog, like Oculus, etc. It can support cards like Force Negation, Coward Spell, Fatal Pushes, all that good stuff. Like the sort of the best sort of interactive pieces within Modern. The sort of best sort of fair pieces in that unfair strategy of Unearth and Oculus.
Yeah. It's very twofold, right? So while this deck definitely wants to benefit more from a known meta, because that way it can curate its sideboard and be able to make a better plan for that, it also is very good at punishing an unknown meta because it's very efficient. Frog is a very efficient card. If people aren't ready to answer it, and it can take over a game. And getting an Oculus out from Frog, or because you got it lucky, early in the game, is really hard to answer. Especially if everyone else is just trying to combo off on you. They don't have as much removal as they really should, which can really give you a leg up on other decks right now.
This deck was a real big winner with the Ring being banned, because what Ring did was this deck particularly was in a real awkward spot of it wasn't unfair enough to beat the Boros Energy decks, and it wasn't fair enough to keep up with the Boros Energy decks. And by that I mean, if you resolved a One Ring, or a One Ring was resolved, all the work that the Temple player did up until that One Ring getting resolved would be null and void, and it was completely. You may as well have not played that game of Magic.
Exactly. So you could remove everything, and then they just drop the One Ring and draw a million cards, and you were behind, and that was that. It was not the greatest thing.
I would say the weakness of this deck, though, is still the go wide strategies and the fast strategies, and Modern is still very, very fast. It's really well placed because of the combo elements of Modern. It's really, this is a great deck to go into like a heavy combo meta. But as soon as that meta game becomes aggressive and go wide, such as because Boros Energy, we'll talk about that in a bit. That's on our list. Is still a very viable deck. That's where this deck can sort of struggle.
Of course, exactly. And speaking of go wide, I think this is about as good a time as any to go to our next deck on the list.
Yep.
Good old Affinity. Affinity. Nice to see it.
Affinity is back on the menu. By the way, Luis, I am drinking red wine as we speak. By the way, this is the first time in the pod I've actually thought, you know what, I'm gonna have a little tipple.
It's been very fancy today.
I'm being very fancy today.
But good old Affinity. It's not that it was dead, but it hadn't seen the best of days in quite some time. And it's really nice to see it back on the menu. Even with something like Meltdown existing in the format, it's still keeping up pretty well. A lot of the lands that you play are indestructible, so you don't get hit in that way. Unlike Legacy, where a lot of the lands aren't indestructible that they play. You have all the usual suspects, Ornithopter, Memnite, etc., etc. But you get to play with a new toy. You have Kappa Cannoneer, which was put into the format in MH3, but hadn't really seen a lot of play.
It was a legacy staple in 8 cast, wasn't it? It's a 4/4. It's got improvise, so you can use your artifacts to tap it to pay for its mana. It's a 5 and a blue. With Ward 4 as well. Ward 4 is basically hex proof. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Kappa Cannoneer, and it can't be blocked this turn. Your deck is full of 0 cost artifacts, Memnites, Ornithopters, and the new hotness, Mox Opal.
And you still have the good old Affinity for artifact cards like Thought Monitor, which is a Thought Cast on a stick. Ways to get that going. You have a Frogmite, a very well known, very well loved card. Those kind of good old Affinity payoffs that give its name to the deck.
It also plays Urza Saga, which is a win condition in itself. The card does so much. And then that means that you've got a Saga Wishboard of Shadow Spear, Graveyard Hate, Lava Spot Boots is actually incredible. It gives a creature haste. If you make a giant Urza Saga token and then you fetch the Lava Spur Boots with the Urza's the last activation of Urza Saga, you can then come in with a big attack of a construct. So yeah, the deck is mental, but the strength of the deck is the fact that it can get under the opponent, that the game plans to try and get under the opponent. But Luis, you said something really good to describe this deck. What was it?
That it's a very feast or famine deck. Either it does a lot of everything that it's doing, or it gets stopped and it looks like it. Why are you putting these bad cards in your deck altogether? A timely meltdown can make you think, why am I playing this deck? I have no cards on the battlefield. I have no cards in my hand. They're all destroyed. They're all dead. I'm left with one indestructible land. Great. And it feels like the worst day of your life. A very feast or famine in that manner, which is not to everyone's play style. It can definitely hurt if you don't like that kind of game. Don't get me wrong. You have ways to stop it with things like Metallic Rebuke, or sometimes you can just make your affinity or actual affinity artifacts are a bit too big in mana cost for the amount that they can melt down. But if they get one of those early, it can definitely give you a hard time. Or something like Hurkyl's Recall, throwing all of them back to your hand. It's not as easy to play them all out as you want, because sometimes your affinity is coming from your lands, and if they're all getting thrown back because, they're artifacts, you can still only play one a turn, which really sucks.
It does have the grind factor, though. I would say with Emery and Mishra's Bauble, you can start a grind, drawing cards through that sort of interaction where you bring, you use Emery to bring back Mishra's Bauble to then draw a card, etc. But it's nowhere near as
powerful
as you would see in Legacy, with the extra Bauble effects, etc. But yeah, this deck is massive win from the introduction of Mox Opal back in the format. Massive win.
Absolutely. And I even seen some with something like Mox Amber, so they're playing double Moxes, which is quite cool to see.
Yeah, because it works with Emery.
And Basim, I think, is the other guys.
So there's a black version. We're going to be linking a mono blue version, but there are different versions. I've seen blue red versions. I've seen blue black versions with Basim, etc. But yeah, so Affinity is our second deck of Christmas.
And to our third deck of Christmas, deck the halls with a lot of Destruction, Death, and Decay, because we have good old Indomitable Creativity with Archon of Cruelty. I know you've been loving this one, Josh.
A deck I'm really excited about, and the reason I'm really excited about this is because, and we're not a finance pod, by the way, but all I can say is I picked up a playset of Ren and Sixes for like £50. So if you're going to buy Ren and Six, and I think Ren and Six is very good right now. Ren and Six is going to see a lot of play. If you can get them cheap right now, I'd buy them. You know, when I first was cracking MH1, Ren and Sixes was like £80 a card. I picked a whole playset for like 50 quid. That was including postage. So get your Ren and Sixes, and this deck utilizes Ren and Six very well. So Luis, what's the game plan of this deck? So it's usually in Jund colors. We have seen in sort of 5 colors to support Leyline binding, which is sort of fell off the wayside a little bit, but we've also seen it in Mardu colors for Lingering Souls instead of Ren and Six. Tell me what this deck does.
So the general game plan is you want to, by turn 4, create some sort of token, whether it's an artifact like a treasure or a dwarf token with a Dwarven Mine or something along those lines, and play Indomitable Creativity. You let that happen. Hopefully your opponent doesn't interact with it. And from that, you'll reveal an Archon of Cruelty onto the battlefield. Archon of Cruelty has a ridiculous ETB and attack trigger, which is you deal 3 to the opponent, you gain 3, or drain them right for 3. They discard a card, you draw a card, and they sacrifice a creature, which is or Planeswalker, which is insane. It's like a 1 for 5, 1 for 6, something ridiculous. A lot of text, a lot of value, and it's a 6/6 flyer that keeps doing it every time it attacks. Really powerful card. That's the general game plan. You know, you control the board with some removal spells, with some little inklings of things. Ren and Six is really good at that, so you keep making your land drops. Because the whole point is to get 3 other mountains plus Dwarven Mine, because Dwarven Mine only makes the dwarf if you have 3 other mountains when you go for your big game plan. And sometimes you can even do a creativity for X equals 2 or X equals 3, and then get 2 or 3 Archons, and that's just ridiculous. But it's amazing. It's really fun to do. You have a lot of other little pieces that either give haste or that kind of thing. And with the addition of Faithless Looting, now you have a bit of a plan B on how you can get your Archons out. Before, it was a bit weak because it was hard to get the proper discard. But with looting, you have an easier way to discard your Archons, so you can play Persist to bring them back. Or you have things like Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, which can also discard your Archons, which you can then persist to bring them back. And it's really, really nice to see something like that working together. It's one of the better Faithless Looting decks right now, and it's been just wonderful. I know you've loved it a lot. You've played it quite a bit of this deck lately.
So the beauty thing this deck is it plays hand disruption, removal in the early turns. You know, you got Render 6, you know, as a 2-mana planeswalker doing its stuff. You know, the uptick on Render 6 where you bring a land back from the graveyard works really well with Faithless Looting, because Faithless Looting is not card advantage. Remember that. It's an enabler, not card advantage engine. But with Render 6 upticking, it can sort of be a pseudo card advantage engine, because, you know, you bring back a land after you bring back a fetch land after you've just after you've fetched and developed your board, bring it back with Ren and 6, and then you can then use that as a looting fodder. You know, it plays Fatal Pushes, Lightning Bolts, etc. So you've got the Ren and 6 ultimate. You can kill them with Lightning Bolts. Fable of the Mirrorbreaker can be a win condition in itself. You've got some utility lands in Besage, etc. Like, it's a really, the early turns are really controlling before it then comes in with this game winning bomb of Indomitable Creativity or Persist for your Archons of Cruelty. I will just read Indomitable Creativity just for the listeners. So it is 3 red and X. Destroy X target artifacts and creatures. This is not one-sided. You can destroy your opponents as well, but be wary when you do that. Destroy X target artifacts or creatures. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until an artifact or creature card is revealed and exiles that card. Those players put the exile cards onto the battlefield and then shuffle. So, you know, you can use it to destroy a problematic artifact or a problematic creature on your opponent's turn, but be wary that they could flip something better or more problematic if you do it. Such as, I don't know, like I had a game the other day that I killed Ensnaring Bridge, and I flipped something irrelevant. You know, that can be a payoff you could do. But yeah, that's what this deck's trying to do. It's trying to cheat in that Archon of Cruelty and win that way.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a card mainly used for your own thing, so you can get the Archons out. But that extra little line of text is nice. It does exactly what it says on the tin, and it just destroys stuff. And sometimes you get screwed over by it. Nothing like I don't know. Let's say you're against your Boros energy opponent. You're trying to remove some creatures because you're going to die otherwise, and then you flip over 3 Phlages and you die. Right? It happens. That stuff can happen. So that's why you have to be careful with it all. But it's a very fun card, very fun deck. It's a deck that is quite grindy. It's very hard to beat in the grind game because it has that almost inevitability of an Archon. But it can also be a little slow on the roll, and faster decks can get you. So be very careful that you are ready for the aggro matchups. A lot of the decks lately have not been running Wraths. I highly recommend people start using them a little more.
Yeah. With this deck as well, I would say that the payoff is 8 mana. But with this deck, you can, unlike, say, an Traxa deck where you're probably never going to cast a Traxa unless you're cheating it out in some way. This deck, you can actually cast Archon. It's 6 and 2 black. You've got Ren and 6s. You're going to be making land drops. You can, you've got removal. You've got Thoughtseize. You've got hand disruption, etc. I have hard cast Archon of Cruelty to win games before, so you can get that far.
You can make those land drops with Ren and 6. Mm-hmm. Then on the 4th.
The 4th day of Christmas, my true love sent to me.
Is it Splinter Twin?
it's just we're going to be linking an Is It Splinter Twin deck, but Splinter Twin is obviously one of the most excited. Like people are most excited about this card because of the nostalgia factor. So it's in. I've seen it in all kinds of decks. I've seen it in affinity decks. I've seen it in aggro decks with Fear of Missing Out. I've seen it in the traditional Is It decks of old, using the sort of wizard package or the new wizards package, but they're using the Is It sort of colors of old because, well, that's what the old combo is,
Exactly. This is definitely a more, I guess, dedicated list for Splinter Twin that we're handing you this time around. Because it has a more protection package, a very wizard focus to be able to use Tameo and Snapcaster and all these kind of things a bit better, which is more like the days of old where you had that more blue controlling pieces, and then you got them with Splinter Twin towards the end. There is a lot of other versions of this deck that are not in that way. They have the combo, but they're very mid-rangey or they're very low. They're lower to the ground. I've even seen it in Boros Energy, once or twice. There's quite a different variety of the ways you can play Splinter Twin. But, this is a card that's been long awaited to be unbanned. People love it. They love this card. Everyone and their mother has heard someone speak about Splinter Twin. So I'm really glad to see it. It's fun. It's I don't think it's the most competitive card in the world, but everyone else is just having their fun right now.
So the combo, for those who are not aware, because this was before my time playing Modern, I was playing Magic when this was around, but I wasn't playing Modern. So you Splinter Twin reads, it's an enchantment aura, so it's 2 red and 2 generic. Enchant creature is tap it, put a token that's a copy of this creature onto the battlefield. That token has haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. So what you would do is you would put it on a creature such as, in this instance, what we're linking is Deceiver Exarch, which is a blue and 2, a 1/4 with flash. So you in turn 3, you flash it in. Untap turn 4, cast your Splinter Twin. And Deceiver Exarch enters the battlefield, choose 1, untap target permanent you control, or tap a target permanent an opponent controls. So you flash it in, tap one of their lands, untap, put Splinter Twin on this. So what it'll do is it will tap itself. The copy will untap the original self, the original one. It'll then tap again. It'll create a new copy. The copy will then untap the first copy, and then you'll do that infinitely, and you'll attack with a bajillion Deceiver Exarchs.
Yeah. You essentially have infinite Deceiver Exarchs that are all 1/4s, so they deal 1 damage each. Generally speaking, that's going to kill your opponent most of the time. There is cards that obviously will stop it. Something, there's things like Rakdos Charm that might kill you when you're trying to go for the combo. There's things like Tameo, who when she's flipped and upticked, every creature that you attack with, deals 1 less damage. It has -1/-0. So there's ways to stop it, don't get me wrong. Just on the battlefield itself, along with actual interaction. You can kill the creature that the Splinter Twin is on. You can remove the Splinter Twin itself. There's quite a few different ways to do this. And it is a 4-mana enchantment you have to essentially tap out for. But it is very fun. It's very funny as well too. There's something about it that just feels great. Splinter twinning your opponent is an amazing little feeling.
It just punishes people who stall or tap out at the wrong moment. Like it's really easy to play around, but it can just get you out of nowhere. There is other creatures that do the effect of the Deceiver Exarch that are like 2/1s and stuff, but obviously they're easy to kill, but get around things like Tamio,
Pestermite, yeah.
So yeah, Pestamite, yeah. So the strength of this deck is the fact that it can be in a tempo sort of control shell, present threats that you have to answer, challenge the opponent's resources, and then you get them with the Splinter Twin combo. But the weaknesses of this actual deck itself is the fact that Modern isn't 2016 anymore. There's things like Force Negations. There's things like I mean, when was Fatal Push brought into the
that was Aether Revolt, so that was a few years after Splinter Twin.
Was it?
Splinter Twin was 2015, 14-ish that it was around, right?
It was
banned in 2016.
I think Fatal Push was in the format then. I don't know.
Aether Revolt. Let me see. Aether.
And then you've got Force of Vigors.
Aether Revolt was 2017.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Fatal Push wasn't even the format at the time. So you've got Leyline Bindings. You've got Solitudes.
There's 1,001 different ways to interact with this card. You have Subtlety, Boseiju, Force of Vigor. There's a lot of free or cheap ways to interact with it that didn't exist before. And yeah, there's other protection, things like Teferi that might help you protect it if you play it in a Jeskai shell. But it's just a lot harder to make work than people might think.
The thing with this deck is, though, you are playing bad cards to make it work. So say if you didn't have the Splinter Twin when you only had Deceiver Exarch, you had that Deceiver Exarch on its own is a bad card. Like
it doesn't do very much.
It's awful. Like it's not very good. But with this Splinter package, it can just win out of nowhere. So we'll link you a sort of Wizards version, because obviously Flame of Anor in that package is really, really powerful. So we'll link you that version in the show notes, and you can have a look at that example. And on the 5th day of Christmas, Santa brings us Boros Energy.
Oh, Boros Energy.
A big bit of a loser from the BNR. It lost the One Ring and it lost Amped Raptor. 2 massive cards in the deck. I don't think it was 2 bans in which made the deck unplayable. I think the deck's still very, very good. It just numbed it down where it wasn't to the level of stupidity that it was in the One Ring meta.
Yep. It's the premier aggro deck of the format. It's a deck that has a bunch of 1s and 2s and was vomiting its hand, and then it put the One Ring and refilled its hand super quickly, and you died. Yeah. We were saying before when we were talking about blue-black Frog and those kind of decks, whenever a fair deck came across it could kill the first few threats, and it could keep up in that way, but then it would drop the One Ring, and you're like, oh, well, guess I'm dead, because now I can't keep up with the One Ring, I can't keep up with all the threats plus that, and it was a problem. And then they had Flage coming from the graveyard with haste because of Arena of Glory. A lot of nonsense, if I'm honest with you, but that's what was happening. And it's very relevant that it doesn't have that angle of attack anymore. Now it plays a lot more fair to the board, and if you can wipe it away, it has a much harder time coming back. But it's still very fast, it's still very powerful, and it can definitely still get you with a good old 1-2 punch of Guide of Souls Ocelot Pride. Make 1 billion tokens and then you die. It does happen very often still.
It can still get you, turn 1 Ragavan, attack you, untap, turn 2 attack you, and then play a Blood Moon on turn 3 and lock you out of the game. Still that play pattern's still there. He still plays one of the best removals in Modern, which is Static Prison. 1 drop that deals with pretty much any problem card in the meta. Flage is still a hell of a threat. Goblin Bombardment with Ajani, Nakato Pariah, flipping that Ajani, getting that incremental value for that way. The deck is still got a lot to bring to the format. It's very aggressive. It probably still is the premier aggro deck. But yeah, it's a lot harder. It's a lot more susceptible to board wipes. That's what its weakness is now. The card advantage engines that it plays. Some decks, the deck we're going to link to the example for the listeners is using Fable and the Mirror Breaker as like a sort of card advantage, card filter and engine. But it can also play other things.
Yeah, this one uses Seasoned Pyromancer for when it's empty-handed.
Yeah.
Your empty Seasoned Pyromancer refills your hand, unlike Fable, which can't draw you cards. It can just filter out cards, right? You discard a card, draw a card. Seasoned Pyromancer forces you to discard up to 2 cards, but if you have nothing to discard, you just draw. So it's actual card draw sometimes, which is quite nice.
Yeah. So the deck is still very good. It is a loser, but it's because it needed to. It was just too good before in this One Ring meta. Seasoned Pyromancer, as Louis said, is a very good sort of card recoup engine to get back those really efficient threats.
It's just very good.
And sort of prolong the deck that way. Yeah.
And I think not a lot of people want to hear about this deck. I'm sure they're sick and tired of it still, but it's nice to see it's still around.
There's a version, the Mardu version is still around, playing Orcish Bowmasters, etc., or Chthonian Nightmare as the card advantage sort of loop. That still exists. People are still experimenting with that, but there tends to be, the cleaner Boros Energy, playing Blood Moons, etc., tend to be putting up more numbers, I would suggest.
Absolutely. And then, for the 6th day of Christmas, we have...
My true love gave to me.
Our absolute... most detested deck of all time, I think, for both Josh and I.
I guess she's not my true love then.
Amulet Titan. Oh, Titan.
Get out of my life.
So, deck's still good, even without the One Ring. Who knew? It definitely has taken a hit.
I would suggest, Luis, like, this might be controversial, but I actually genuinely believe this was the best One Ring deck.
It might have been the secret best One Ring deck. Specifically... for the One Ring, it used it so well. You could get a One Ring out turn 2 super consistently, and then because you have that extra turn of you can't hurt me, you can't do anything to me. Maybe you could interact with my board, but it's not that easy to interact with an amulet.
Mm-hmm. No,
they would then draw 3 cards over 2 turns, and then they would dump out a Titan or 2 or 3, and you're dead.
Yep.
It was. Quite an experience playing against this deck sometimes. It's such a difficult deck to interact with because of how they're so land focused, and lands are notoriously known for being difficult to interact with properly unless you had specific cards for them. Don't get me wrong, when you do have the specific cards, it does do a number on Amulet Titan, but it is such a consistent deck, such a really robust and a deck that can really contain itself really well. It's able to rebound from everything. People that are really good on the deck really know how to play around the threats of their opponent. And it's a deck that can benefit the player who is an expert of it really, really well. With Green Sun Zenith as well, a new edition, it's been amazing.
Yeah, I think this is one of those decks where, like, if you are a good Titan player, the deck seems absolutely broken, and I think that's why the deck has not been touched or it's been in Modern for, like, even through all the Modern Horizons. The deck has been untouched. It's been always been powerful. Teetering at the top of the tables, always top of tournaments, and it's because of the high skill variance with this deck. I could try and explain the win conditions now, but I could. It uses a Primeval Titan. It uses Amulet of Vigor, which then ramps you using your tap lands. Amulet of Vigor says whenever a permanent enters the battlefield, tapped under your control, untap it. So you play lands such as Simic Growth Chamber, which add a Simic, so green and a blue. But you have to sacrifice a land not sacrifice land, but bounce a land on its ETB. So you use the amulet triggers to then ramp yourself up into Primeval Titan, which is a 4 generic and 2 green. 6/6 of trample. When it enters the battlefield, you can search. So when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may search your library for up to 2 land cards. Sorry, not basic lands, but any land cards. Put them onto the battlefield, tap, and shuffle your library, and then you have like a sort of a wish board of lands that you come in and you can win through that way. The deck also plays Scape Shift. So you can win through Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle triggers, etc. Like there's so many angles of attack with this deck, but they're all through the lands, which tends to be the weakness of this deck. If you attack the land base, Blood Moon effects, Mages of the Moon effects, Harbinger of the Seas, etc., this is where this deck sort of crumbles.
Exactly. It's a deck that, while it has a lot of angles of attack and it's very, very consistent at getting to what it needs to do, if you're able to attack its land base, which is what the deck needs entirely, it can crumble under itself. A Blood Moon can lock it out. The deck is very hard to function under that unless you can find a Boseiju at a timely time, and you have the basic forest. If you don't have it, good luck doing anything. You're kind of just stuck there. And it's a deck that kind of, when it wins, it looks ridiculous, but when it wins, it's just going to win. It's just like any other deck. It just does its big thing to win. And while it may look obnoxious, it's not as bad as people make it out to be. Whereas when it's losing, it looks pathetic, right? It looks absolutely pathetic. It looks like it's a pile of garbage that does nothing. But what makes it frustrating is those lines of sometimes it gets you on turn 2. It can kill you on turn 2, which is ridiculous when you think about it.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it's not a super high chance of it doing it, but it does happen. You're able to copy your Amulet of Vigor with quite a few different kind of, you have Urza Saga to fetch it sometimes, or you have something like, what's it called? The new land, I can't remember its name.
Oh, it's this one.
I'll think of it in a moment. It's a land that lets you copy an artifact, essentially. I can't remember its name right now. Mycosynth Gardens, something like that. Can't remember, but the Mycosynth Gardens. That's what it's called. It's able to copy the amulet itself. So if you do that really early on, then you have 2 amulets. And when you have 2 amulets, when you play one of the bounce lands, you untap it twice, make 4 mana per land before bouncing a land. And that's ridiculous, especially when you have extra land effects like Explore, Dryad of the Elysian Grove,
Arboreal
Grazer, Azusa. There's quite a few different ways to do so. Or Spelunking. I know Canister recently did a challenge, top 8'd. He was playing 4 Spelunking, which is insane to me, but he knows the deck way better than I do. And it's really interesting how it's all come around. They're even playing something like Dryad Arbor these days because of Green Sun Zenith, a great way to ramp on turn 1 where you go Forest, Green Suns, grab Dryad Arbor, so you have an extra land drop essentially. And I'm excited to see what comes out of the deck. Green Suns is a bit hit or miss I've seen so far. I know Canister was saying it's the worst card in the deck, which is quite a strong thing to say. But it is very fresh, very new. There's still a lot of exploring to be done with it. And Titan, as much as I'm not the biggest fan of it, is a good deck to still have around.
I mean, sometimes it loses itself. I mean, the amount of times I won a game against Titan just yesterday, where they Summoners Pack did for the Titan. They played the Titan, and then I stifled the trigger using Consign to Memory, which meant that in his upkeep, or in their upkeep, should I say, they couldn't pay for the packed cost, which is 2 and 2 green.
Yeah,
because they returned had too many lands to the hand using the bounce triggers, etc. So yeah, sometimes it can lose itself like that. Happens.
It just happens. Up next on the 7th day of Christmas, your true love gave to you
it's a pauper deck.
Mono green Basking Brute Scale, essentially.
Basking Brute Scales.
What a card. It's a lowly common that has been doing quite a number on the scene. You might know this deck a little bit better than me, Josh, because you love your Pauper.
I do like Pauper.
What does it? What does it do? How does it do its thing?
Okay, so Basking Brute Scale is a 1 and a green. However, it's got Devoid, so it can't be Green Sun Zenith. So you can't shoot it for this combo. Well, you can't shoot it for this half of the combo anyway. So it's a 2/2 with Adapt 1 for 1 and a green. But when the text is, when 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put onto Basking Brute Scale, you may create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice to create colorless. So what this does is If you pair this with Blade of the Bloodchief, which says whenever a creature dies, put a +1/++ counter on an equipped creature. If equipped creature is a vampire, that's irrelevant, +2 on it. So what you would do is you would adapt Basket Brew Scale, attach Blade of the Bloodchief to it using the creature. The creature dies, so you put a +1/+1 counter on Basket Brew Scale, and then you then create this loop where you make a massive Basket Brew Scale. Like you can make infinite toughness Basket Brew Scale. Now, if you have a Glaring Fleshraker out, which is 2 and a colorless, a 2/2 Eldrazi, whenever you cast a colorless spell, create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice a creature, add a colorless, which is fine. But the second line of text for this is what's relevant with that combo. So if you have the Basket Brew Scale out, the Blade of the Bloodchief, and this Glaring Fleshraker out, Glaring Fleshraker says, whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, Glaring Fleshraker deals 1 damage to each opponent. So that's a 3-card combo where you kill your opponent out of combat. So it's just you sort of drain them or kill them for one damage every time you do the essentially loop, if you will.
Exactly, and it is infinite colorless mana as well. So you have cards like Walking Ballista that you can make a use of to just kill your opponent out of combat as well. Or sometimes you can get into the red zone. Your Basking Brute Scale becomes infinite power and toughness because of the +1/+1 counters, and sometimes you send it sideways and your opponent dies. Right? There's quite a few different ways that you can get to them and attack them. It's really an interesting and fun deck. It has a lot of consistency to it. It's relatively resilient compared to a lot of other combos, and it even has a Karn package in it, which can be frustrating. You can pull a lot of different pieces that you might be missing. You played one of your Blades of the Bloodchief in the sideboard. You can play a Walking Ballista in the sideboard, or just one of the many hate pieces that are available to the deck that might help you just close out the game. And it's just a very resounding, fantastic deck that has been seeing proper play. Obviously, Blade of the Bloodchief is not legal there, but they have other ways to do it. And Mox Opal is the newest addition to the deck that has increased its speed, sometimes considerably. It can just get you dead very, very quickly if you're not ready for it. If you don't have the right interaction piece to remove the Basking Brute Scale or the Blade of the Bloodchief itself. So nice, well done to the deck. It's adapted quite well to the unbans, and we're going to see what else it can do in the coming days.
I mean, it plays really efficient ways to sort of cycle through the deck. It plays Ancient Starings, it plays Malevolent Rumble, it also plays Kozilek's Command to great effect. In the mana base, it has Eldrazi Temple, so Kozilek Command is cheaper. Glaring Fleshraker is cheaper. You can cycle through your deck quite efficiently. You're right, it does have the Khan the Great Creator Wishboard, so you've got that utility there. It's just a great it's just a great utility deck with the combo finish to it.
Absolutely. And then we have on the 8th day of Christmas, one of my favorites. It's currently being called Rakdos Delirium. Essentially, it's a Hollow One deck, right? It's a Hollow One deck. It does Hollow One stuff. It is beautiful. How I love the card Burning Inquiry. It is one of my favorite cards ever. It's a card that each player draws 3 cards, then discards 3 cards at random. The chaos. I love it so much. For a single red, you get to do that. And it makes use of that really, really well with a card like Hollow One, which reads that Hollow One costs 2 less to cast for each card you've cycled or discarded this turn. It's a 5-cost generic creature. It's a 4/4. But when you've discarded 3 cards, it costs nothing. It costs 0. If you discarded 2, it costs 1. Because discarded 1, it costs 3. So it's a really nice way to get this card out for cheap. And you have more than just Burning Inquiry to do so. You have things like sometimes Goblin Lore used to be played in the decks. A lot of them are dropping it nowadays because they just don't need it. Because of the addition of good old Faithless Looting. Looting. What a card to... I'm so happy to have it back. I love this style of deck. Looting is my favorite kind of card, and it works really, really well with the Hollow One strategy. You have cards as well like Fear of Missing Out, which lets you discard a card as well. So if you can do something like Looting plus Fear of Missing Out, and that's 3 cards you've discarded. and that is a free hollow one once again. You have your Street Race, which you can cycle for 2 life, which when you cycle, you're discarding the card to draw another card, so another way to cycle. And it has a lot of other little different payoffs. You know, they call it Delirium because of fear of missing out, allowing you to attack an extra time with one of your creatures when you have Delirium, or because your Phoenix, which comes back from the graveyard by bestowing it with evidence, I think 6. You remove cards from your graveyard to do so, or your Nethergoyf, which becomes gigantic for each card type you have. You know, for each Delirium, or however you want to call it, that you have in the graveyard, it becomes a massive, massive threat. It's very fast, very strong, with a lot of really, really fun combos like good old Orcish Bowmaster plus Burning Inquiry, because you're forcing your opponent to draw 3 cards. It feels so good. It's amazing pinging your opponent for 3, or pinging something random for 3, and then attacking them with a giant creature. It's so much fun. It really is.
It's a very chaotic deck, you know, because you do have that Burning Inquiry line where you could see yourself, you know, discarding your hollow ones or discarding a payoff piece, but you can manage that with, as you said, with the Orcish Bowmasters, you know, flash them in turn 2, then you can, you know, double Burning Inquiry. It doesn't really matter what you discard because you've made a massive Orc army token and you've pinged them for 6 damage, etc. You know, there's ways to manage that chaos in this deck, and you know, there's lots of things you actually want to discard, such as Detector's Phoenix. You know, Faithless Looten's fine to discard. You know, you can flash that back, etc. And I do believe that within this deck you can get your Delirium up to 6. Is that right?
You can get it higher than that, because so you have Tarfire, which is a Kindred instant as well. You have Hollow One, which is an artifact creature. Mishra's Bauble is also an artifact. So you have artifact, enchantment, land, creature, instant, sorcery. I think 5, 6,
tribal,
and tribal Kindred. Kindred. So it's 7, I think.
Okay, that's like, let's say nearly the top. You know, if you had the Planeswalker in there, that'd be 8. You know, it's really high and really easy to get Delirium online in this deck. It sort of struggles with, you know, when they have that Bowmasters fight, or you know, if your Fear of Missing Out gets hit with a removal spells, or you know, it can run out of gas, you know, in the face of a board wipe, etc. But you know, you do have that explosive early turns potentially, and the ceiling in this deck is very, very high for an aggro deck.
Yeah, very, very much so. And sometimes you just get free wins as well. You know, Burning Inquiry, turn 1, your opponent discards all their lands and they can do nothing. It's a bit of a cheesy way, but it does happen.
Yeah. You know, it's one of the, I'd say it's one of the winners with the burn for the Faithless Looting deck. You know, they just took out Goblin Laws and put in Faithless Looting. It's much more efficient, and in this deck, it's definitely a card advantage plan, because you know, it's enabling so much. It's enabling your Detectors, Phoenixes, etc., and your, you know, other Faithless Lootings, all that good stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a winner from this BNR, but it does have its weaknesses. You know, the consistency might not necessarily be there, and it'll struggle getting through a big threat such as a Murktide, for example, or some sort of the Eldrazi creatures, etc.
Yeah, it can definitely struggle with some of the huge threats that come out of some decks. But very fun deck. I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorites, and I know you'll love it as well.
Oh yeah, I do actually fancy this deck, to be fair. So the next one, so we're on 9 now.
Yep, the 9th day of Christmas.
So this was, I would suggest, one of the bigger winners for the Mox for the Mox Opal unban. Now, to me, Mox Opal is enabling one of two things. It's enabling sort of like a really fair, I say fair, but affinity, you know, aggro plan where, you know, it's doing honest magic where it's trying to get under you, you know, have this aggro sort of plan, or it's enabling some really horrible combo decks. Now, Luis, Grinding Station profited massive from this unban. Can you just explain the combo for us?
So Grinding Station is using a combination of a legendary creature, Mox Amber, and what's it called? Underworld Breach to create mana, essentially. And now with Mox Opal, it can also do that. So the way it would work is you would play your Mox, you have your Mox Amber, you have your legendary creature, usually a blue one, in this case Tameo, Basim are the ones that are used. or Emery, you would create a blue mana. You then either have another Opal in the bin, another Amox in the bin to replace it, while using the card Grinding Station. Grinding Station is a card that reads, sacrifice an artifact, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Whenever an artifact comes into play, you may untap Grinding Station. So you would tap it, you would mill yourself, you would then sacrifice your Mox Amber or Mox Opal, you'd play it back once again, which would untap your Grinding Station with Underworld Breach, yep. Make another mana, do it again, and again, and again, and again, until you've gone through basically your entire deck, where you have Thassa's Oracle. Now that you have next to no cards or 0 cards in the library, you play it, you win the game. Nice and easy, super simple, amazing. And that's one of the easiest and best ways for the deck to win. It has technically a few more options, but that is like the most... That's the combo of the deck. It wins by milling itself out, getting to 0 cards, playing Thassa's Oracle, and boom, you're dead. Nice, and it's a fantastic way for it to do so. Very annoying because it's so many angles of attack. Having to deal with the graveyard, having to deal with a bunch of artifacts. It has Urza Saga that lets you fetch some of your pieces as well to do it. And with Mox Opal, you have more versions of Mox Amber that are just better because Mox Opal only needs artifacts. So you're not requiring that extra legendary creature or legendary thing to be around. And it's a great way for this deck to use this fast busted mana, which works with its combo, which is really, really cool to see.
So this was a good deck to bring into the Boros Energy meta, because before, when the One Ring was still around, it was they're doing Boros Energy stuff or you're doing a broken combo deck thing, and this was one of the broken combo deck things that people chose to bring. With Mox Opal coming in, Luis, you're completely right. It takes it almost a step away. You don't no longer need that legendary creature. You just need to act. You just need to have Metalcraft Online. For Mox Opal, and then you can just do the, it requires one less card to do the loop. You do need Grinder Station, 2 Mox Opals, and the Underworld Breach, rather than having a legendary creature on top of that as well. So this was a massive, massive benefit from the Mox Opal ban. Strength of this deck is the fact that it has this really hard to interact with combo. Well, maybe not necessarily hard to interact, but it has this really strong combo piece that is very deterministic. The weaknesses of this, spell snares in the format, a well-timed surgical extraction can turn this deck off. It is open to
consigning the Thassa's Oracle trigger is huge sometimes, because if they're not able to remove it and replay it, well, they might just die. Yep,
exactly. Yeah,
it's a
really interesting deck, and it's going to put on numbers. I think this is a deck to keep an eye on, honestly.
It's definitely a little complicated for people newer to Modern, so be careful out there. There is some complex lines, you have to be careful with it, but it's very fun. And we have quite a few players that I Roebuck is one that I know loves this deck to death. And it's just really, really fun. So highly recommend it for anyone that's looking for something a little more spicy to play.
10 days to Christmas, Luis.
Oh, and this is a good one. An oldie but a goodie. People have probably missed it quite a bit. Good old Hammer Time, baby.
It's back. Decks are coming back into this format, and that's what's interesting with this BNRs. Like, decks that have died because of MH, Modern Horizons 3. Modern Horizons 2 meta, they had these decks, sort of the deck we're talking about now. Hammer Time was a massive format staple. Modern Horizons 3 gets printed, decks nowhere to be seen. These BNR means that old decks are coming back. Mox Opal is now. This is another deck that profited from Mox Opal, and we're back. We're here, casting Sigada's Aids. We're casting Pure Steel Paladins, and we're getting Colossus Hammers out with Stoneform Mystics. What's this deck doing, Luis? Tell me.
It beats you down with a gigantic hammer until you're dead. So the deck got a lot faster with Mox Opal as well. It can more consistently kill you on turn 2, which is scary as heck. You're able to use your Mox Opal along with your Colossus Hammer, usually a Sigarda's Aid, sometimes a Pure Steel Paladin, and some creature to hit your opponent either for 10 damage, which is a huge bunk, Or if you have the Inkmoth Nexus, which is a land that can become a infect creature that flies, which is insane. When you hit for 10 infect, your opponent is dead. Not 20, 10. So it essentially cuts their life total in half. Josh, you're very acquainted with infect. You love it very, very much.
This is a very infect style game of play. You know, you're getting a threat that has some sort of evasion on it, or a threat that's, you know, really, really low powered, and then you're coming in and you're smashing it. You almost not smashing it, but you're pumping it with some sort of pump spell. In this case, it's Colossus Hammer. You know, you use Sigarda's Aid. Sigarda's Aid is one white and an enchantment, and you may cast an aura enchantment spell as though it had flash. If this had if you have Pure Steel Paladin out as well, you know, you can flash it in and then equip it for free, essentially, or move it around, you know, for free, because Colossus Hammer does have with Pure Steel Paladin. So Colossus Hammer does have an equip cost of 8, but with Sigarda's Aid, you can bring it in and then it automatically gets attached to a creature. So your Sigarda's Aid out, Colossus Hammer out, it gets attached. But with Pure Steel Paladin, I believe it's Pure Steel Paladin. What's the one that gives it flash?
I know. Sigarda's Aid gives flash. Pure Steel Paladin gives equipment for free when it's already on the battlefield.
So Sigarda's Aid gives it flash, and then Pure Steel Paladin means you can move it across for free.
Yeah. So normally the play pattern is you would animate your Nexus, you would attack with a Nexus, and you have 1 mana somewhere, usually a land. In this case, Mox Opal definitely fits that case.
Yep.
And this is with the Sigarda's Aid already on the battlefield. Once you've attacked, because it's a flying creature and it's rarely going to be able to be blocked, you attach the hammer, wham, 10 infect. Great way to do it. Otherwise, you have Pure Steel, and you can go like, I'll attack with this creature while it has the hammer. Post-combat, you then attach it to another creature, and now that creature is on defense with a gigantic hammer. And it's not very easy to get past it.
A little trick with this deck. So what would happen? So what Hammer does, it removes flying for anything. So Inkmoth Nexus has flying, it removes that. But a little trick with this deck is if you attach the Colossus Hammer to the Inkmoth Nexus and then reactivate Inkmoth Nexus with another mana source, it will then give itself flying again to give itself evasion. Yep. But usually the play pattern is attack with the Inkmoth Nexus. You know, you go to blockers, they can't block because of evasion. And then you attach the hammer and kill them that way. But, you know, a little trick is you can actually re-give the Inkmoth Nexus flying through the activated ability, because the activated ability gives it flying.
Exactly.
So yeah, really cool deck. This plays Kappa Cannoneers, or the version that we're going to link in the show notes. So there's another way of, you know, getting a threat through any blockers, etc. Yeah, it's a really, really cool deck. I'm glad to see this being back, because this was a well-loved deck by a lot of people.
Exactly, and it died for quite a long time. It just wasn't being able to see any play, and it's really nice to see it, that it's starting to see some play again. I know a lot of people are going to be very happy to see it.
The weakness of this deck, though, is that, you know, if it doesn't have a threat to attach the hammer, it can be really lackluster in that way. Or if it doesn't have the Sigarda's Aid or anything like that, you know, there's ways to interrupt this combat, and it can this combo, and it can sort of the deck almost fizzle. You know, it doesn't have other Stoneforge Mystic tutors such as Kuldotha or anything like that. You know, it's more in on the hammer, the Colossus Hammer plan, and that can be interrupted.
Yeah. It's Kappa Cannoneer gives it a little bit of a longer game, but generally speaking, it wants to be quick. It doesn't want to grind. Not a great deck to grind, generally. You know, especially with Meltdown in the format nowadays. Meltdown can absolutely blow you away if you're not very careful. Down to the 11th day of Christmas, Josh.
It's nearly Christmas time. It's nearly Christmas time, mate.
Goryo's Vengeance.
So this is a deck this deck has been doing well still, and this doesn't actually. Some versions, I mean, the version we're linking does play the Faithless Looting, but you know there are Esper versions that didn't play Faithless Looting and still did really well because the actual package is so strong. But this has only got better with Faithless Looting if you're playing that, and it is essentially much like the Creativity deck we spoke about earlier. is trying to get a fatty into the graveyard, usually a Traxxas or Gristlebrand, and it's trying to get that back using a Goryo's Vengeance, which is a instant, and it reads, it's a 1 and a black, and it reads, return target legendary creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then you have to exile that at the beginning of the next end step. So what you would do is you bring in a Traxxas or a Gristlebrand, you would get the Atraxa triggers, or you'd activate Gristlebrand to draw some cards. You would then get your Ephemerate, which would then bounce the creature back into play, which meant that the Goryo's Vengeance trigger would cease to happen. So you have this fatty you have this fatty with lifelink, still in the battlefield, but you've also gained the benefit of drawing loads of cards as well.
Exactly. It does so much with that one big creature. It stabilizes the entire game. Something so a 7 or 8 drop in the early parts of the game is not very easy to defeat, and it can absolutely take over a game with a ridiculously unfair way. But even if you have to play the more fair way, you have cards like Psychic Frog, which can be a house. You have Solitude, which can ephemerate, and now you're exiling 2 creatures your opponent has, and you have a 3/2 lifelinker doing combat. So it has some more fair ways. Well, I say fair with ephemerating a Solitude, but still some more fair ways of playing the game, and it can grind pretty well, generally speaking.
Unlike the sort of decks, the creativity decks, I see this is quite similar in terms of the the game strategy is cheating in a big fatty. You can't really cast you'd be struggled to cast the big payoffs here. Gristlebrand itself is 1, 2, 3, 4 black and 4 generic. So it's a real strain on the mana base, and then Atraxa plays green to hardcast. So you're not really hardcasting any of these threats in the long game. You sort of have to cheat them out, which means that the deck's susceptible to things like Grafdigger's Cage is making a comeback now, Surgical Extraction, Leyline of the Void, etc. So there's real scope for this deck to fail with interaction or on interaction.
Exactly. But it's an oldie, but a goodie. We love it. I used to play it quite a bit, before the ring banning, and it's nice to see that it's sticking around and doing its thing. It's always lovely to see. We'll have to see if Faithless Looting sticks around with it, though, because I know adding an extra color it's not always the easiest thing. No. But it's nice to see it has another home.
The 12th day of Christmas, Luis.
Oh, yes.
Another, I'd say oldie, but it's like MH3 oldie.
Kind of.
Shout out to Duffy, by the way.
He loves this deck.
Through the Breach, an Eldrazi Tron-esque deck that, we thought that the Tron decks or the Eldrazi decks did got a massive hit with the One Ring because they used, lots of decks use the One Ring, let's face it, but this deck particularly used the One Ring to recoup some of its card disadvantage, but also get into the actual draw into actual combo itself, which is having a big dirty creature in play, whether it be an Ulamog, an Emrakul, or a Devourer of Destiny, or whatever, and it used the card Through the Breach, which is a instant, almost like Goryo's Vengeance in a way, the way it's cheating something out. So it's 4 and a red, which is not necessarily that much mana if you think about these, soul lands and stuff that the Eldrazi decks are playing. You put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. That creature gains haste. Sacrifice that creature to the next end step. So what you would do is you cheat in like an Ulamog the Defiler or an Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, and you would just essentially
annihilate your opponent.
Annihilate all the resources away. Ulamog can get in a position where it's big enough to actually just kill the opponent outright if you've got lots of big mana stuff exiled, particularly through the Devourer of Destiny trigger. Ulamog can be big enough to just kill you outright, but that Annihilator trigger is absolutely devastating.
Or even your Ugin's Labyrinth, right? You can put another Ulamog or an Emrakul under it, and that's now an extra 10 or 15 counters, and you're not surviving that.
Yep.
It's very hard to deal with. And it also uses a really cool piece that we haven't seen until now. It came out with the Assassin's Creed set that, I know probably a lot of people don't remember. Yggdrasil Rebirth Engine. What a card. It is just it's essentially another way to Through the Breach, but from the battlefield, which is kind of weird, but I'll read it out. So when Yggdrasil Rebirth Engine enters the battlefield, exile all creature cards from your graveyard. Tap, exile the top 3 cards of your library. Or 4 and tap, put a creature card exiled with Yggdrasil onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So what happens if you play this card, you exile an Ulamog or an Emrakul or something from the top of your library? Yeah. Well, now you can Through the Breach with it. Amazing. It's pretty sick. And it also fits because it works for Ulamog himself, who wants to have something exiled. So another really cool way to make this deck work. It keeps the wheel spinning. And an extra layer of attack with Palantir of Orthanc, which is a card from Lord of the Rings. At the beginning of your end step, put an influence counter on Palantir of Orthanc. And scry 2. Then, target opponent may have you draw a card. If that player doesn't, you mill X cards, where X is the number of influence counters on Palantir of Orthanc. And that player loses life equal to the total mana value of each of those cards. Let me tell you, your opponent cannot risk taking that damage. And if they do, they might just get popped. So it's a great way of drawing extra cards and keeping that card engine going. Now with the loss of the One Ring, this is just a nice way to do it. Or sometimes being a cheeky little win con if your opponent is silly enough to not let you draw a card.
Yeah, Emrakul costs 15, Ulmo costs 10, Null Drifter costs 7, Devourer costs 7 as well. You're taking massive damage and they get, it's either give them cards or, you take big damage. And it seems to be like a lot fairer way than the One Ring to accumulate card advantage, etc. But yeah,
it's scary. It's very scary.
Obviously, the weakness in this deck is the mana base. You attack the mana base, etc. It can be a really bad time for them. And the Through the Breach combo, I think Spell Pierce is really good now. Force Negation is really good right now. A lot of the stuff can actually be interacted with on the stack. But yeah, that's the 12 sort of picks that we wanted to talk about. I mean, this is not we've seen all kinds of decks in Modern at the moment. It's a brewer's paradise right now. This is not the 12 decks you should play or look at. This is the 12 decks that we got excited about on the Battle Chats podcast, and we want to talk about as this little like Christmas, not special, but the Christmas season. We tried to spin it in a 12 decks at Christmas. Yeah. The one thing I would say, Luis, and you might agree with me on this, is that Modern has become a lot cheaper. Bar Mox Opal decks, bar Mox Silver decks, Modern on a whole has become quite cheap.
Yes,
relatively cheap.
Yeah, while the cards that got unbanned obviously are seeing spikes, and they're definitely going to see drops, guys. So be careful when you're getting some of these cards. Generally speaking, Modern's become cheaper. You don't have to buy your place out of the One Rings anymore. So that's another £200-300 or dollars, depending where you're from, that you're not having to spend on One Rings and things like that. A lot of the other pieces are quite cheap, or people already had, because a lot of their old cards have become essentially unbanned, is what it feels like. So Modern has gotten definitely a lot cheaper because of that. And we can't forget that because of the printings of MH2 and MH3, fetch lands are generally cheaper as well. So it's nice to see a much healthier space for the Modern format in terms of cost. It's it was feeling a bit dicey there. People literally looking like you have to take out a small mortgage to be able to afford a deck. So I'm really happy to see that it's a lot healthier, a lot nicer, and a lot friendlier to newer players as well.
And if you're struggling where to go within this new meta, because it is a brand new meta, just take the deck you were playing before, providing it's legal still. You're not playing Boros Energy with the One Rings still in it, for example, but providing it's legal, take the same deck and just throw it in, see what happens. Zoo, you don't see much of that, but Zoo's still probably very viable. You just don't play Gigantha anymore because it's banned. But, just take that deck that and take that strategy that as the baseline. At the last pod, we talked about the importance of baseline going into a new sort of meta. Take that baseline, find that baseline, and then adapt from there. But yeah, if you're thinking, I don't know what to play or where to go, just take your same deck you've been playing the whole time. as long, like I said, make it legal if it's not legal, and then throw it into a league and see what happens, and then learn. Get the reps in. Doesn't matter if you lose the first couple of these or you 0-5, whatever. You're going to learn something. You're going to adapt, and then you come back.
Especially at FNM, if when you go into paper things, not everyone's going to be playing the most hype stuff. You're going to see a lot of Splinter Twins out there. It's going to be funny as heck. It's going to be a great time. And to you lucky few that still have your Mox Opals, you can enjoy all the Mox Opal decks as well, because that card is ludicrous right now. Very, very expensive. Hopefully, it's going to come down. I expect it to. Especially, I think Wizards is likely thinking of a reprint when cards get this expensive. But it's just nice, enjoy this Brewer's Paradise.
They're definitely rubbing the hands somewhere, wouldn't they? Like, we could
yeah.
reprint this into a chase set. Like, that's what we want. This is a chase card. But yeah, it's great. It's so exciting. Like Modern is such an exciting format, and it probably is one of the more exciting formats out there. I love Legacy. I love Pauper. I love all those stuff. But there's something about Modern that just hits differently, and even a terrible Modern, I'll always be looking at Modern meta games. I'll always be wanting to play Modern. Like, it's just a fantastic format that just keeps people gripped, but definitely keeps me gripped.
Absolutely. Anything else you wanted to say for this one, Josh, or are you pretty happy with it?
I'm pretty happy with this, but I just want to say Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope you have a good New Year as well. We're probably not going to be back until after the New Year. I might drunkenly say to Luis, shall we do that one more podcast and a deck tech or something? Might see something like that, but probably you won't see us now till the New Year. We're going to enjoy the holidays. We both of us had really busy years. Myself, I've got 2 jobs and a family, and Luis is slaving away in that bank, and I too busy qualifying for RCs and stuff. And Luis is going to have a very, very special RC coming up, I'm sure.
Over in January, ready for it. Good old RC Prague. I'm very excited. But yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our little rundown of the 12 decks of Christmas. And yeah, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your grandmothers as usual, all the good stuff. And
Abuela.
Hopefully we'll see you in the New Year, guys. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Take care.
Hey, Luis, I actually think I got a little bit drunk on this pod.
Just a little bit.
Bye,
Take care, everyone.